Always true.
We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
Is that going to
Hello and welcome to this special coverage of the ongoing situation in Turkey after Friday's failed attempted coup, where I'm joined in what is an exclusive interview with the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in the capital Ankara, in his first ever live interview to be broadcast on an international network. Mr. President, thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera. I want to start by asking about the events of last Friday. We've heard many conflicting reports of what exactly went down, when you found out, how you found out that you had missed or managed to rescue yourself from a possible assassination attempt by just a few minutes. Could you tell us the details of what exactly went down on that fateful evening, please?
Well, first of all, thank you very much to all the TV viewers that are watching us in front of their televisions. I would like to send my heartfelt emotions, my gratitude from here, Beştepe, from Turkey. On Friday, 15th of July, around 8 p.m., it was about 8 p.m. and we were in Marmaris. We were there for a vacation of 4 to 5 days, and we received the news. And once we received the news, we tried to contact our colleagues and friends, and our efforts to reach certain colleagues mostly failed. And then we were able to get hold of some people, some colleagues, and then we had a discussion, and after the discussion we decided to have a press briefing, and during that press briefing, I advised people not to panic, nobody should panic, and I invited the people to take to the streets, to take to the squares, that it would be the right thing to do, because within a democratic parliamentary system, when you have a president of the republic elected to office with 52% of the vote and the government that received 50% of the vote, in this type of a country, this sort of a coup d'etat or an attempted coup will to be best answered by the presence of the people on the street, answering to those who want to impose their will on their decisions. Now, after that intervention, I was glad to see that, to follow that the people actually abided by that recommendation and took to the streets. And then, of course, I went on air on 4 separate TV channels trying to spread this message as much as possible.
But before we go to the people's reaction, there's one detail that a lot of people are asking about. Who told you about this coup? Because today we heard that one of your MPs from the AK party said that it wasn't the head of the intelligence agency that told you, and that the head of the intelligence agency knew 4 hours before it happened, from 4 p.m. and didn't know. Who told you about it? And also, how did you manage to land safely in Istanbul?
Well, we learned it afterwards. While it was my brother-in-law that gave me the first news. But initially, my reaction was disbelief when faced with that piece of information. But of course, following developments verified that initial information. And when that happened, I had a conversation with the head of the National Intelligence Agency, and in the following process, I was already with the Minister of Energy on site, and then we decided to take a number of steps. And the first step, one of the first steps at least, involved me and my family to take a helicopter from where we were to Dalaman, and from Dalaman to come to Istanbul by taking a plane. When we came to Istanbul, when we arrived in Istanbul, of course, there were some difficult moments there as well. And those difficult moments were, of course, very tough, very difficult to explain, and we had F-16 jets flying at low altitudes, faster than the speed of sound, And that was, of course, an effort to instill fear in the hearts of tens of thousands of people who were assembled there. And then we sat down with a number of colleagues in positions of authority, and we planned the aftermath, what was going to follow. And then the following developments were under our control, and it went very well, very positively, and within 12 hours we were able to take the situation under control. With those developments, of course, we were always very careful about one point, because previously we had the Gezi protests and some other events which all provided experience to us. So we also went back upon those experiences. And the commander of the First Army made a declaration. We had the chief public prosecutor from Ankara who also made a declaration. That was followed by other prosecutors. And those interventions helped a great deal in taking the situation under control. They were very helpful.
Following those events, when we're talking now about what you have done in terms of reaction, not just the popular reaction of the people, but you've carried out, or your government and authorities have carried out arrests of more than 10,000 people. You came out on television and said this was not a military coup, but it was an attempt by a small section within the military to overthrow democracy. Rounding up 10,000 people isn't a small number.
Well, within the armed forces, it is impossible to have an exact figure of the people that were involved, but it is clear that it was a minority. And we refer to it as the FETÖ terrorist organization. Now, the minority tried to impose its position and will on the majority. That's what was happening. And by taking steps that night, we had the opportunity of putting an end to that. And when that happened, we controlled it and put it to a stop, brought it to a stop.
How is it that something that was so well planned, well thought out, that involved not only the army but the judiciary and other things, as your authorities have claimed by arresting these people, how is it that something like that could happen without your intelligence services preempting it, being aware about it?
Well, there is, unfortunately, clearly a lack in our intelligence, a deficiency in our intelligence with this situation, because had we had strong intelligence, then this Fethullah or Gülenist terrorist organization would have never had the opportunity. Across the world, intelligence agencies, of course, they might have their shortcomings or deficiencies. Even the mightiest, the strongest intelligence agency can and does have shortcomings. We saw that in the United States during 9/11, in Russia, in Europe, in Belgium. Everywhere we experience these kinds of situations. What matters is to minimize these kinds of occurrences. Therefore, our intelligence agency has to become much stronger, and we have to, of course, quickly determine the points of weakness, get rid of those, and take the necessary steps. But what I observe is this: on the intelligence side, even beyond technology, the human element and human intelligence is way more important. Therefore, in terms of human intelligence, we will be taking very strong steps. It's what needs to be done. The events of that day, the Gülenist terrorist organization, of course, despite all the structures and measures, despite all the steps they had been taking and they took, this attempted coup was, of course, suppressed, and I do not accept the idea that this suppressed attempted coup was the end of the story. They might have their plans of their own for the upcoming period, but regardless the plans they might have, we have to know and acknowledge one point. It is that when the state comes together hand in hand with its nation, they will not allow passage to those people. And the nation has embraced its state, and since the nation has embraced its state, the tanks could not achieve any result. And the nation stood in the way of tanks. That was remarkable. That was very important. That's what the people achieved.
This remarkable or unprecedented show of unity, I will come back to it in a couple of questions, but I want to ask something on the issue of arrests. How was it that you were able, if you didn't see this coup happening, how was it that you were able to find so quickly all these culprits I mean, all these thousands of people. What kind of evidence did you have with regards to rounding up these people? Or are you just questioning them now? What is it that allowed you to act so swiftly?
Well, we, of course, have our suspicions. We have suspects. Now, the laws prevented many things. The laws put a block in the way of many things. And seeing that some people played active roles in this attempted coup gave us the opportunity to discover the ties and connections they have with certain circles, and we already had an idea as to their connections. Therefore, the judiciary acted immediately. It's working around the clock. Of course, the judiciary also knew these things. The intelligence services also had information on those people. Now the intelligence services are simply documenting their already existing information and making that information concretely and readily available. And the tensions that are now ongoing and the questionings that are now ongoing, as a result of these, the national police obtained certain pieces of information. The police intelligence, the national intelligence, they are working very heavily and taking additional steps. And I was referring to human intelligence a couple of moments ago. On the human intelligence side, we have started obtaining significant documents and significant pools of data that has started to come pouring in. Right now, we have 9,004 people in detention, in pre-trial detention, and we have 1,933 arrested. So with those in pre-trial detention and people that have already been arrested, it doesn't mean that it's the end of this. It hasn't ended. It hasn't come to an end, in my opinion. So those in pre-trial detention and those that are arrested, I think they will lead us to many more names. That's the reality that's starting to become obvious now. And of course, we will remain within the boundaries of law, because Turkey is a state, is a democratic country where you have the state or the rule of law. So within the boundaries of our laws and legislation, the judiciary will continue working, and as the judiciary will continue to work, the information it obtains will be very important, because we started to now have people confessing to certain things and situations, and those people that are confessing are leading us up to many other names, and those names now have clearer connections and ties with the head of the terrorist organization in Pennsylvania.
Mr. President, because of these mass arrests, your allies or supposed allies like France and the United States, and either their governments or leading media outlets there, have been very critical of you. In fact, they say that, yes, you know, while they were against the coup, they believe that or they accuse you rather, of not being democratic either. What is your response to that? Particularly, we heard scathing remarks by France's foreign minister right after. And they're meant to be your allies.
Now, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of France, I don't know what he said, but there is only one thing I will say. Within a very short period of time, in the face of the terrorist acts in France, France, of course, took numerous steps and took a certain stance. Did they not detain people en masse? Did they not arrest people in very high numbers? We cannot deny those situations, and 3 months ago they had an emergency state. It was three months initially, it was then prolonged another 3 months, and then another additional 3 months for the peace and tranquility of the country, obviously. Now, an attempted coup, is it a crime or not? It's a crime. So, if an attempted coup is a crime, then whose responsibility is it to catch the culprits? Well, the state will apprehend these people and hand them over to the judiciary. In a country with the rule of law, the judiciary, after due process and trial, if they find people guilty, then they impose the necessary punishments on them. Now, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of France, if he had those comments about me personally, it's a big mistake. I mean, he should first mind his own business. Does he have the authority to make these declarations about my person? No, he does not. If he wants to have a lesson in democracy, he can very easily get a lesson in democracy from us. The Roma people in their country, in France, they were expulsing those people out of their country. They were sending those people away. So what kind of a thinking did they have in terms of human rights? I think that was a clear example. But in Turkey, we have 3 million Syrians and Iraqis. We are welcoming those people. So nobody should try to teach us lessons on this point. Currently, we're simply trying to find out who got involved in this attempted coup. We are detaining those people, and the state is simply taking the steps it is supposed to take.
We'll come back to international reaction once again later, but I want to talk to you about the one thing that you brought up, which was this show of unity. It's no secret that Turkish political society has been very divided over the past few years. In fact, probably more polarized than it has been in a long time prior to this coup. But when we saw tanks roll out into the streets, we saw an unprecedented show of unity. We saw the head of the CHP, MHP, NGOs, those are the main 2 opposition parties, NGOs, everybody came together against the coup. Will you be using this opportunity? Not only actually, even the media, for example, CNN Turk, which you have criticized yourself and other outlets, they came out against this coup as well. Will you be using this opportunity to try and usher in a new era whereby the situation in Turkey is not so tense, whereby there will be greater collaboration between the different political parties, between yourself and your opponents?
Well, we are not a movement that is far and removed from collaboration. Those that insult us find the right to insult us in them, but they should allow, let us allow us to be critical of the people that insult us. It is our right of criticism, and we have never insulted anyone, and we will never do so. We are simply trying to do everything within the boundaries of law. That has always been the case. Now, we lost 246 innocent people, including those that were unfortunately squashed by tanks. We have 1,500 injured, and given that this is the scale of the events that happened, how can these people continue to say things like Erdogan is this, Erdogan is that, Erdogan is a dictator, or Erdogan is not democratic?
What I mean is, we saw, for example, you thanked the opposition and you thanked the parliament for standing against this coup. Would it be far-fetched to imagine or to see maybe in the near future some sort of joint meeting with yourself and leaders of the opposition parties? Because Turkey is under serious threat, not just from the coup.
Of course, there is no obstacle to that. We can always do it. Our Prime Minister did it. And I would be more than happy to make these kinds of calls and organize these kinds of meetings, because that is the joint problem of our nation, of our country. We cannot turn our backs on these problems. And I am the president of this nation. So coming together with all of those people would be an honor for me, no problem whatsoever.
Yesterday, we heard very interesting developments, which was that the 2 pilots who were responsible for downing the Russian jet last year, that they were arrested in relation to this coup. Does this mean that when they downed the Russian jet last year, they acted without direct orders?
Well, I think the judiciary might have had this doubt because those 2 pilots are now in detention, so the judiciary started that process.
You've clearly pointed the finger at Fethullah Gulen, and you say it is his movement who is behind this. Till now, he is still in the US. If the US does not accept your request to extradite him, what will this mean for Turkish-US relations? Particularly when you're talking about the base of Incirlik here, the US using that, how strategic it is. What will happen if they refuse?
Well, in my opinion, bringing those 2 issues together is not the best thing, is not the right thing to do. I think we need to be more sensitive. Because the relations between states are not based on emotions, are not based on feelings. It's the reason and the intellect that should come to the forefront in the relations between the states. If that's not done, of course, that would be a huge mistake. Therefore, we will be providing all of the documents, all of the evidence to the United States via our ministers. We've started that process of sending all of that over to the United States. And then we will wait for the decision decisions of the authorized instances of the United States courts, of course. And we are strategic partners, we have a model partnership, and we have to continue our solidarity, because our solidarity should not be very short-term. We have a very long history of relations and ties. We have very common points with the United States, and I do believe that in the upcoming process they will be speedily taking the necessary steps.
Mr. President, before I asked you about the two pilots who brought down the Russian jet, I wanted to follow up on that, which was right after that incident, I interviewed then Prime Minister Ahmed Davutoglu, and he told me that there were orders given not specifically for this incident, but the order, it was an open order for anybody who intervenes or crosses over into Turkish territory, that they should be shot down. Why then did this happen if you're saying they are now arrested? Did the plane genuinely go into Turkish territory, or were they too quick? Did they skip the chain of command? What is it that led them to act in this way, or why are they being arrested for this incident?
Well, when it concerns their entry into the airfield, yes, it happened. The Turkish airfield airspace was violated, and warnings were issued repeatedly as a result of that violation, and that violation continued back in that incident. But when, of course, the questionings are going to take place, we still don't know if, this event or their affiliations had anything to do with that. Maybe it was not a factor in that, but they might still have ties with Pennsylvania, these pilots, these people in pretrial detention. Of course, the judiciary will do its best to question these people in detention, so those people might have ties with that group. However, there is, at the time, we don't have any clear evidence that it is tied with Russian planes or the Russian plane incident. But what is clear is that since these individuals took part in this attempted coup, since they acted against their own citizens, their own nation, the Turkish Grand National Assembly, our parliament, they bombarded the parliament, their people. They similarly bombarded the presidential complex, and they similarly attacked the offices of the prime minister. So those kinds of people, you can expect everything from them. I mean, imagine a scenario where they have tanks, using those tanks to roll over their people, their own people, and they smashed vehicles and cars using tanks. So those people, you can expect everything from them. And at the end of the day, they hopped on a helicopter and they fled from Turkey into Greece. And they looked for other ways of fleeing and getting out of the country. So this is the approach and attitude they have, and their understanding of religion is also very different. I'll give you an example. The individual in Pennsylvania, the head of the terrorist organization, they think that that individual is closer to them than their artery, than their main artery in their bodies. So this is simply an insult, and it's a heresy as per our religion, because the only thing that's closer to us than our arteries is Allah Almighty and nothing else. There can be no other person or no other presence that's closer to us. So they have this distorted understanding of religion. So they are now starting to break down, and the process will continue, but we will remain within the boundaries of the law, and we simply want what is necessary to be done. And we will remain within the democratic parliamentary system. We will never step back or move away from it. However, for the peace of our nation and for the unity and solidarity of this country, whatever is necessary, then it will be done.
On the US-Turkish relations as well, a very quick question here, which is, John Kerry had warned that Turkish membership of NATO, Turkey being the second largest military in NATO after the US, would be under threat if it continues, according to his words, to act in this way in terms of cracking down on people and stuff. And obviously there's talk of you possibly bringing back the death penalty, as has been a wide-scale demand by a cross-section of society. I must say, we've spoken to people on the streets, which would also affect or essentially kill any idea of you possibly entering the European Union. With regards to Kerry's statements, what's your reaction? And would you be willing to sacrifice membership of the EU in favor of bringing back the death penalty?
Well, John Kerry then negated all of those words. The embassy here in Turkey refuted those expressions and those statements. And when it comes to NATO, NATO has made it very clear, very loud and clear that they are with us, that they are on our side. Secretary General Mr. Stoltenberg made that very clear. He called me, we had a discussion on the phone, and we also had a phone conversation with President Obama. And President Obama told me that he was on our side, they were on our side against this attempted coup, that they were supporting our democratic fight. And we had all of those conversations and discussions, so that is out of the question. Those are just made-up statements, and my kind request would be that our people in front of their TVs should not believe these fake statements, people in Doha or people watching the broadcast in English, but also similarly people here in Turkey following the Turkish broadcast should never believe those fake statements. They are not the truth, they do not reflect the truth. We always had those conversations.
And with regards to bringing back the death penalty, are you willing to pay that price of never entering the EU in favor of that?
Well, about this issue, I would like to say the following. The authority that will make the decision is not just me. The people have voiced this demand. The people have taken to the streets and they kept saying capital punishment, and capital punishment. But the instance that will make the decision is the parliament, is the Turkish Grand National Assembly. If the parliament makes that decision, then the duty of the authority, the power, is to pave the way for this punishment to be reinstated, reintroduced. If the parliament makes that decision and forwards it to me for approval, I will approve it. I already made that statement, I already made that clear. But one point has to be mentioned, the world is not simply the European Union, right? The European Union is 27 or 28 member states. Do you have the capital punishment or death penalty in the US, in Russia, in China? And in many other countries of the world? Yes. Well, if there's a discussion of this in Turkey, why are people bothered? For 53 years, we have been knocking on the door of the European Union. They have kept us waiting for 53 years. Many others have come and gone after us. In my opinion, the decision lies with the nation. If the nation decides this, then all of those countries that have faith in democracy should respect it.
Okay. Just moving on now, and this is particularly for our Arabic audience, there's been a mixed reaction to what's happened, particularly in the Middle East. We saw official media in particularly countries like Egypt and Syria and even the United Arab Emirates, their official newspapers printed the next day that the coup had succeeded, that Erdogan had either fled to Germany or gone somewhere. At least I can confirm you're not in Germany, we are here in Ankara, but what is your response to that? Why do you think they were so swift in essentially declaring your demise?
Well, since Friday, I did not leave the country. I have not left the country. I've been here. Germany and other places, it's out of the question. It simply isn't true. It's mere speculation. And it's, again, made-up news. It's fake news. And they're trying to portray Erdogan in a difficult situation according to their own reason or logic. But we have to be clear. Now, Sisi is a coup plotter, just like the people we have in Turkey right now. Sisi used weapons and arms to topple Mursi, that was democratically elected, and he was the chief of staff and minister of defense of Mursi, right? And this behavior of Sisi, can we respect it? Thousands of people were killed. He killed thousands. Can we respect that individual? That individual has nothing to do with democracy. He is not a democrat by any definition. Now, another step or stage would be Syria. Now, in Syria, Assad is a killer, is a murderer. 600,000 people, Syrians, were killed in Syria, and he still continues killing people. If people that have faith in democracy in the world take these positions seriously, then it's the own decision of the nations of those countries. But as we speak, Syria is a country that's longing for democracy, and they are looking forward to the time their will be reflected in the government. The same for Egypt, but not under the shadow of weapons. Without weapons. In Turkey, it's the polar opposite, the complete opposite scenario. You have a president that got 52% of the vote of the people, Erdogan, and then the Gülenist terrorist organization attempted what happened. And who will side with these people is known by us. We know it. Even right now.
Were there other foreign countries, do you think, that were complicit in this coup attempt? And if you do think there were other countries, which countries do you think they were?
There might be other countries involved as well. The Gülenist terrorist organization also has another superior mind, if you will. And I think the time will come when those connections will be deciphered. We have to be patient. And those superior minds are guiding them. The coup plotters followed the instructions from that superior mind. But I don't think that it will take long, because the judiciary is acting, and I think all of those connections will come to the light of day. So statements are being taken, and very interesting words are being used during those statements. And now we have had a series of publications of those statements. For instance, you have one individual who said that the head of the Gülenist terrorist organization is the individual in Pennsylvania. He says that he never had one-on-one contact with the individual, but he says he knows full well that everything is being directed from there. I think similar statements will follow. We just have to be patient.
We have around 5 minutes left, so I want to squeeze in two questions, if you don't mind. The first, what was unique about this coup attempt was not just the unity of the people, but also the means in which they combated and resisted this coup, even yourself. What was iconic, I remember I was in the studio watching at the time where you had your iPhone FaceTiming. Now, a lot of your critics and opponents say that it is ironic as far as they're concerned that you used new media even though new media has come under attack. What is your response to that, these accusations that for some reason they believe that there isn't free press in Turkey, or that you have some sort of vendetta against the press?
Well, Jamal, as far as I know, you would be in a position to know if the media, if the press in Turkey is free or not, because Al Jazeera, of course, has people and offices here in Turkey. I have never been against media, and there have been numerous insults and libels against my family, and those outlets continued broadcasting. But in this incident, even them said that they were on the side of the president, because that direction would also doom them, would also be the end of them. And in Turkey, the freedom of expression, I have always supported the freedom of expression in Turkey to its fullest degree and extent. However, freedom of expression should not turn into a tool of attacking other people's freedom of expression. It doesn't give you the right. You need to remain within your own space of freedom of expression. You should not overreach. Insult is never freedom. Criticism, of course. I have always defended these points. I'm still defending these points. I will continue doing so in the future.
My final question to you, Mr. President, is this, and it's a personal one. You lost a very dear friend of yours. We saw you at his funeral. This coup attempt, you managed to flee with your life with a few minutes. Are you scared for your life?
Well, what we are supposed to do is take measures, and we will take measures, and the rest is the decision of Allah.
But how do you feel? I understand the decisions, but how do you feel?
Yesterday I was in Istanbul. We were initially supposed to have this interview in Istanbul with you, but then I had to quickly leave Istanbul to attend meetings here in Ankara. So I came to Ankara and we're having this interview with you in Ankara. Where are we? Well, we are in Ankara in the presidential complex, and last night I had the president of Georgia here. I welcomed him. We had a meeting with them. Today we had the National Security Council meeting, which was then followed by the Council of Ministers meeting. And in a short while, the outcome of the Council of Ministers meeting will be held in a press conference setting. So all of our ministers are here. We're working. We have a lot to do, and we will never allow the peace in this country to be broken, to be shattered. And we will also shortly have a video conference to address the people in squares and in the streets across different parts of the country. Therefore, there is no concern. I am in office with all of my friends and colleagues. We are continuing our march. Nobody should have any concerns.
Defiant as ever. Mr. President, thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera.
I would like to also thank Al Jazeera for being very sensitive about the issue.